So right now in our app, if you look at our to-dos reducer, we're only handling the case for adding a new to-do. But if you look at our to-do actions up here, you'll notice that we actually have three use cases we want to handle. We have add to-do, which we're already handling. We have remove to-do, and we also have toggle to-do. So what I want to do in this video is go ahead and add in these functionalities so that we can dispatch these type of actions as well. So where we need to do that is inside of our to-dos reducer function. So we already have if the action type is add to do. The next step is if the action type is, let's go ahead and do remove to do. So now the question is, how do we want to modify the state if the action that occurs is a remove to do action? Well, if you look at our action up here, you'll notice that we have the type as well as the ID. So what we want to do is we want to basically filter out the to-do that has this specific ID. So what we'll do down here is just as we did on line 43 with concat, we want to do something similar, but instead of concatenating on a new to-do item, we want to go ahead and call state.filter. This is going to be the specific to-do item, or it's going to be each to-do item inside of our state. And then we will say if to-do.id does not equal action.id. So again, what's going to happen here is when we dispatch an action with the type of remove to do, we're going to filter over all of our state, which at this point is just an array, and we're going to remove wherever to-do.id, which again is coming from right here, does not equal action.id. So if you've used filter before, this should be no problem. Next, what we want to handle is when action.type equals toggle to do. And again, we're being passed, or this specific action has a property of ID on it. So what we want to do, let's come in here and we will say else if, and then let's go ahead and throw this guy inside of our last else block here. So else if action.type equals toggle to do. And now the question is, how do we want to modify the state, or how do we want to update the state based on this specific action type? Well, this one's a little bit more tricky because instead of just concatenating on a new item, or instead of just filtering out a new item, we're actually modifying one of the items inside of the state array. And we have to be careful here because if we modify one of those items directly, then that would make to-dos an impure function, which is bad. We want to-dos to be, and we need to-dos to be a pure function. So first what we'll do is let's call state.map. So we're going to map over our current state and get a brand new array, which represents our state. So this should be to-do. And then the first thing we want to do is if the specific ID on the to-do we're mapping over does not equal the ID on the action that's being passed in, or the action that occurred, then what we just want to do is nothing. We just want to go ahead and give back that to-do to our map so that way nothing changes with it. But if to-do.id does equal the actions ID, meaning then we actually want to go ahead and modify that specific to-do. And specifically what we want to do is this is the to-do right here. So if the ID of the to-do we're mapping over matches the actions ID right here, then we want to come in here and change complete to be true or false, depending on what it is. So we basically want to change it to be the opposite of what it currently is. So the way that we'll do that is we'll just come in here and create a brand new object. The name is going to be to-do.name. The ID is going to be to-do.id. And then complete is going to be the opposite of whatever to-do.complete is. So now whenever the app dispatches an action of toggle to do, what we're going to do is we're going to map over our current state, and wherever the ID of the to-do we're mapping over matches the ID on the action, then we're going to create a brand new object here, but complete is going to be the opposite of what it is. Now, you might notice one downside to the way that we're doing this right here. If we eventually start adding different properties, or if we change the property names on our object, specifically on our to-do item, then this syntax or this logic right here might break. So instead of doing this and hard coding all of the properties and copying them over, because we're trying to avoid actually modifying the object itself, let's go ahead and use a new feature of ES6 called object.assign. This actually might be ES5, I'm not really sure, and I don't think it matters too much. But basically what object.assign does is it allows us to merge different objects together. So what we're going to say is go ahead and create us a brand new object, just as we barely did. Merge all of the properties of to-do onto that object, but instead of complete being what it is on this object, go ahead and make it the opposite of whatever to-do.complete is. So this syntax right here is essentially the exact same as we had before, but if we go and eventually modify any of the properties on our to-do items, this syntax will still work, assuming we didn't change to-do.complete. All right, so now what we've done is we have our reducer function here, and it's handling more cases than just add to do. We can also now remove to do, and we can also toggle to do. So let's go ahead and see this in action again. So we'll come and copy all of this again. And now inside of our console, let's paste in our reducer, our create store function. And so you'll also notice what I've done down here is I've just done store.subscribe again so that we can see, or we can get a log whenever our store changes. So now we want to call store.dispatch a few times. So let's go up to our actions. And first, let's go ahead and call store.dispatch, passing in this add to do action. So there we go. We have a single item inside of our state now. Let's go ahead and add a new one. Say learn view. We'll give it an ID of 1. And then we'll add in one more, something not related to programming. Let's say learn to snowboard with an ID of 2. So now we have 3 different things inside of our state. But now what we should be able to do is we should be able to dispatch a type or an action with a type of remove to do. And the ID that we want to remove, let's go ahead and remove our action with an ID, or our to do item with an ID of 2. So we should remove that last one. There we go. So now our new state, you'll notice, has two items in it, neither of which are this to do right here. And then just to make sure our last action type works, let's go ahead and call store.dispatch. This time, the action that we want to dispatch, let's give it a type of toggle to do. And the to do that we want to toggle will have an ID of 0. So what we expect to see is this very first item, learn Redux, now has a complete of true because we went and called store.dispatch with an action of type toggle to do and an ID of 0, which coordinated with this first to do item right here. So at this point, everything in our app is working pretty good. We have our to-do's, we have our to-do's reducer, we have our create store function, and then we have all of our actions. But you'll notice here, and this is more kind of just like a community standard, you don't have to do this, but inside your reducer functions that you create, odds are you're going to have a lot of if and else if statements because you're handling a lot of different action types. So instead of doing something like this, what you typically do, and again, this is just a community standard, you don't have to do this, is you use a switch statement. And if you've never used a switch statement before, it goes like this. So we're going to switch on action.type. So first, if action.type equals add to do, just as we're doing right here, then what we want to return is that right there. And then we're going to do this for every single case for our action type. So just as we have below on line 50, we want to say remove to do. And if action.type is remove to do, then we will do that logic. And then finally, we have, if the case is toggle to do, then we want to return this. And then we also want to come in here and set a default case, which is just our else case, as we have right here. And to do that, we will just type the keyword default and then return the state. So again, this isn't something that you have to do, but typically you do it because reducers are going to get pretty large because they are handling a lot of different cases for the different action dot types.